Hi, I'm Rob.
And I'm Rob.
And this is Ask Rob and Rob.
Welcome to Ask Rob and Rob. It's another week of answering your property questions. It works pretty well as long as you send your questions in. So if you do have something on your mind and you'd love to know an answer, the way to get it across to us and to get on the show is so easy.
It certainly is. It's all in one safe place. And that is the Property Hub website. Go to propertyhub.net/ask and you can get your question in there. There's a few ways you can do it, and you can even get your question to appear in the Sunday Times as well. Now, that's very exciting. But what is more exciting is that we have a question to answer right here, right now. And that first question is in from Sylvia.
Hi guys, can you shed some light on the Thanet district of Kent? I'm thinking here of Ramsgate, Broadstairs and Margate. Are they really that up and coming as you get to hear in news and social media? Or do you think that it's going to take generations to actually regenerate? I'm thinking of picking up a 2-bed terraced house around 250k to use for myself for holidays, but I also would need it to pay for itself from rental income. So is this area a good investment, or could this be a big struggle? The houses I'm looking at are in Ramsgate specifically. Thank you.
Sylvia, thank you for your question. Now, I'm going to just say straight away, I am not an expert on Ramsgate, Broadstairs or Margate. But in the interests of this podcast and everybody listening, to add some value, I will give you a general answer. And the general answer is this. My experience over the years has told me that regeneration projects, unless they are huge off-the-scale projects, take a long time to make a difference. Longer than anybody normally would expect. And for those areas to really kick on, it would need not just the local high street to get a bit of paint and a few flower boxes installed. It would need massive, massive money spent. And that often is in the form of transport links. Transport links can make a huge difference to a location. So if those areas got upgraded transport links that suddenly change the commute times into, say, London, then that would make a meaningful difference to those areas, and more investment then would be attracted to those areas. A prime example of an area that I've looked at many years ago and expected it to do well because a lot of money was being put into the city and it was in need of some investment, was Hull. And Hull, on paper, had everything going for it. I invested before it got Capital of Culture. I saw what Capital of Culture did to Liverpool. I've seen they had the offshore wind projects going there. There's huge amounts of money going in from companies like Siemens. It had much more money being poured into that city than any of the areas that you've mentioned. Yet, I think it's fair to say, and I'm sorry to the people of Hull, that it hasn't been transformational. Has it improved? Yes. But has it been transformational? No. And I think what's really holding Hull back is it needs better transport links. And there's probably more to it than that. But the transport links are really poor into Hull. And I think that's probably one of the core reasons it's held the city back. So with all that said, I could be wrong. And one of those areas could absolutely rocket and be the next trendy area, and suddenly everyone lives there, money pours in, and it completely transforms. But normally that doesn't happen by chance. And a bit of social media coverage and a bit of minor investment isn't going to change things dramatically. So if I was going to invest in one of those areas, it'd be the one with the fastest train links to London. But Sylvia, you may have done your research, you may have seen something that I'm missing, and you may do very, very well there. But will I be investing in any of those areas in the next few years? I would say unlikely, unless something changes dramatically.
Okay, let's hear another question now from Becca.
Good morning, Rob and Rob. My name's Becca from South London. First of all, absolutely loving all the content. I have been obsessively listening to your back catalogue of podcasts, and I've bought Rob's book and then most of the way through that. I'm very excited to get into property this year. I've kind of done a flip in the past, and so's my partner. We are looking to potentially set up a limited company because I already have another limited company I could use some of the profits from. But I have questions around how to set up the sort of shares and basically structure the company, because potentially for our first project, I will be putting in a lot of the money and my partner will be doing a lot of the labor. So how do you work out what's a fair split of the profits, etc.? And also I was thinking of doing possibly a flip with my brother-in-law in the future. And in that case, how do you work out what's a kind of fair split in terms of investment and profits, depending on who's putting the money in, who's doing the workload? And also if you have an investor, say another family member puts the money in. Yeah, are there websites that have examples of contracts you can draw up for this, et cetera, so that we can sort of make sure that we're doing that fairly and everyone understands how that's going to work? Thanks very much.
Becca, thank you so much for getting involved in the podcast, going through the back catalogue. Of course, this will stand you in wonderful stead, whatever you decide to do in property, and we really appreciate it. As for your question, I've got a few things to say. Firstly, what's fair? There is no answer to this. Unfortunately, there is no standard. It's down to you to decide what is fair. So if you've got a situation where one person is contributing the cash and another is doing the work, then really where the split is, that is up to you. What I would say is that if the person who is doing the work can put in a bit of cash, that is often helpful because it means that they've got financial skin in the game as well. So if that's a possibility, that often works well. If you've got a third person in the mix who's contributing funding, then there's a couple of options there. The best for you would be for them to accept a fixed return on their cash because you'll probably end up giving them less that way. The other, of course, is to cut them in for a percentage of the profits. But again, there is no formula. It's whatever you work out. But beyond how you split the profits, there's a lot more to think about. So the second thing I'll say is, yes, you should definitely have a contract for this. You should get something drawn up. There are templates that you can find with a bit of Googling, but what I would suggest doing is actually writing up your own contract in everyday English and then taking it to a solicitor and getting them to formalize it. So doing it yourself first has two benefits. The first is that it sets the scope and keeps the costs down. So if a solicitor doesn't have to pull out of you what you want, it'll take them less time. It also means that they're likely to focus on what matters and not pull something off the shelf that's got like 30 pages of generic stuff that's just not relevant to you. But the other advantage to doing it is that it forces you to think everything through. Because a contract is legal protection, yes, but it's also kind of like an operating manual for how it's going to work. And so going through the process forces you to think through things other than the happy situation. So it forces you to think, well, if more money needs to be put in, where does that money come from? How do you agree it? How does that change the split? If we're unable to sell the property, what happens then? Who makes the decision about what to do? Who makes the decision about cutting the selling price? If you need to hold on to the property because you can't sell it, you need to take out a mortgage. Whose name goes on that mortgage? It's really important to think all this stuff through before you start, like all possible scenarios, not just the good ones. So doing that as an exercise is the most valuable conversation you'll have anyway. And it can also form the basis for the notes that you give to a solicitor. And we can't have an episode of the podcast without mentioning AI, so I'll chuck that in there as well. If you're not sure what you should be thinking about, ask ChatGPT, describe the situation and say, we're trying to put together an agreement. What are the factors we should be thinking about? And it'll probably come up with a few things that you would have otherwise missed. So it's an example of where these tools can be really useful. So Becca, no direct answer, but loads to be thinking about, and good luck with your projects. That's it for today, but we'll see you back here on Thursday for the Property Podcast. Have a great week till then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.